Well, I've got
Hello and welcome to Clergy and Collars Getting Coffee. Today, my special guest is the Reverend Dr. Bruce Levine, who's the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Olean, New York. He is a graduate of Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, both for his MDiv and for his doctorate in ministry. And he's very soon, going to be the moderator of the Presbytery of Western New York. He also happens to be one of my godparents, along with Aunt Marlene. So others can call him the Reverend Dr. Bruce Levine, but I'll call him Uncle Bruce. So welcome, Uncle Bruce, to the show.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here.
Yeah, I'm nervous, but it'll work.
It's good. Nervous isn't, that's courage, right? Being afraid and doing it anyway. So
Yep.
Thanks for modeling courage to us. So you've been in ministry. You did one of those straight from undergrad to
Right.
seminary through.
I think it's 45 years. I can't remember, but I think it's 45 years.
Yeah, that's my age. So basically a whole Leah person, you have done ministry. So what have you, in that time, is there anything that you've gone, I wish I had learned this? And then also with that, this is a twofold question. What are the things that you think we as pastors now should be thinking of as you see things trending in ministry? Because 45 years in ministry, you've seen some trends. So
What do I wish I had learned? I think if I had learned plumbing and electrician work and how to keep a church plant going and do repairs. And I have this theory, it's just kind of that because there's going to be so few full-time pastors anymore, that maybe seminaries ought to be offering vocational training as well.
so they should be bivocational training
Yeah.
schools. And you think the trades is the way, like Jesus, we should become carpenters and teachers.
Oh, I don't know, but I just know that the trades are something that always comes up in the church in terms of practical stuff, and we were never trained for any of it.
No, most people I know who do it, it was as a hobby, or YouTube has now taught them how to do that work.
You can learn everything on YouTube, I think.
You can. Now, when I was young, we didn't have YouTube, and we had the library. And because my mom, we lived with mom, and she didn't have a lot of money, but we always lived very close to the library. So she would send us down to the library to get the home improvement books before YouTube. So that if she couldn't fix it, then we'd have to call somebody. But there was always this moment of going, well, let's see if I can fix it myself before we call somebody in. And so we'd often get sent to the library to get, I don't know, Bob Vila's home improvement book set series or something on this particular thing. But you learn a lot in that process. Now, I was not the kid who, I just would go get the book and then I would leave and go read my own stuff. And my brother Jacob Moore learned some of those things that I did.
It's just not my skill. It's not my talent.
Not my talent either. But you did mention an interesting thing about, so you see the trend, like there aren't going to be as many full-time pastors.
Where I am, I think I'll be the last full-time pastor of my church.
Yeah. So what would then, but there's still a number of people in seminary. So what do you think the future church looks like if it's not full-time ministry in what we know as a traditional church structure?
I don't know. I can't remember her name. Is it Phyllis Tickle? I think.
Yes. I mean, that's a person.
Yes.
Tribble?
Who said Tribble. Is it Tribble? Tribble. Who said that every 500 years the church undergoes some kind of radical change, and we're at one of those 500-year points. And I don't know, in the near future for my church, I see us linking up with another church and sharing a pastor.
Okay.
Because where I'm located, it would be very hard to get a part-time pastor to relocate there. if you're not in a big city,
It's harder.
it's hard.
Yeah. So you think there's going to be more of a shared ministry in the future for people to do?
Shared ministries and bivocational ministries.
I feel like I have a number of friends who kind of do some of that now. They already, they preach, or maybe they're a quarter time or half time, but then they're also doing other things in order to, most of it seems like it's teaching or something like that, in addition to the work
Mhm.
that they're doing, and several people doing more what we call in our system validated ministries, right? So,
Yeah,
and that seems to be, I think, more of what people will do. And of course, in the Presbyterian church, we also have the new worshiping communities, which are in some ways, I think, tent making, is that a difference? Like, I sometimes get all confused with the language myself.
tent tent making, I think that's kind of like bivocational ministry, but with more on the vocation part. And
Okay.
but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, but new worshiping communities, like I've seen some that are basically like they're CrossFit gyms slash
Yep,
Bible studies or
yep.
biking ministries, or like where they get together and they hit the trails on their bikes. And
Well, as I was reading the other day, and I've seen it, and I think it's pretty valid. People now don't have a whole lot of faith in the church.
hmm,
They like Jesus, but the
he's
church
cool.
not so much.
What
Um,
do you think what do you think? I mean, obviously, in addition to, I think the scandals, whether they
yeah,
were sexual, financial, whatever, certainly helped people lose faith. Do you think there are other things that helps? Do you think there
judginess,
are other things? Judginess?
judging it. That's a
We
word.
excel. We excel. Yeah, sure. We excel at judginess in the church.
Judginess. Yeah. Um, and although I know it is important for many people, too much politics, too much involvement in politics, especially where so many churches have sold their soul to extremist politics.
Yeah. I mean, that's a rough one, because sometimes I mean that's a weird edge. I've certainly been thought of as being too political in a moment. I try not to do that in the pulpit. Um, but sometimes I get confused. I'm torn between what that means, Um, for instance, these laws that are coming up in Tennessee that are anti-trans and the drag and whatever. And I have a real problem with those theologically, because I feel like it's saying someone isn't a child of God, and that bothers me, because I'm like, if God didn't create them, even if they don't believe in God, I
Yeah.
do, right? So if God didn't create them, who are you saying did? Because that's how they were made. They were made that way.
Hmm.
And it's fine. It certainly doesn't hurt anybody, but it does hurt them if they're not allowed to be who they are. And so then it's like this weird edge. Is that considered by some to be too political? Like I shouldn't be speaking on Tennessee's drag laws, or um I mean, I don't live in Tennessee, so but it doesn't mean it's not going to influence people in the state of New York where we live, right? Um or is something else seen as too political? Because I always see it as like, I'm not going to advocate for a candidate from the pulpit.
Right. But we have to be political in some sense because politics is the way we organize society. I mean, we need it to keep society organized. But I think you can be somewhat political in the pulpit as long as you really strenuously avoid being partisan.
Okay.
You know, I don't dwell on it but in terms of racism and the like, you can talk about some of the problems of structural racism from the pulpit, as long as that doesn't become your whole everything.
Right. I mean, I've heard from multiple sources now, multiple people now who've lifted up the idea that really as pastors, we have like 3 sermons that is that right? Like 3 sermons that we keep preaching about, like 3, you know, I guess themes. And for some of my friends now, they've said, I don't even think I have 3 anymore. I think I just have 1. Like I just have 1 theme that I keep bringing up. So if you were to think about your sermons and things like that throughout 45 years, what would your what are the 3 and or the 1 thing that you have constantly preached on?
I think I don't know if it's because I've felt a transition in my preaching to pretty much now it's our relationship with God or our
Mm.
relationship with Jesus and how that transforms our life in order to do other work, even the nasty political work that sometimes you argue that I don't know that I'd choose that if I didn't think that's what Jesus wanted me to do.
Okay.
And that another sermon would be, and this is my main one, that God loves you and does things, and that's supposed to empower you to love other people and begin to see those who society looks down upon. Remember that they're children of God. Remember they're God's children and worthy of respect and being treated with dignity. That's probably,
Yeah.
and then maybe we need to spend some more times on our basics like prayer and Bible study too.
Our basics. I like how you call them that, your basics, your practices. I mean, because those things matter. I finished a book not long ago by James K. Smith about, the practices of the church are, he talks about the idea of Descartes, right? I think, therefore I am. And that sort of, what is that, postmodern? I always get lost in the words. Sometimes I hate all the words, but that idea that we are what we think. And he is like, no, we are those things that we love, and our practices and our actions tell about the things that we love. So having practices that are about prayer and study would be some of those actions that would speak about how we love, about our relationship, to hear that we are loved and beloved by God, in order to empower us then to go and love others, in order to give consistency, because life isn't consistent. This.
Yeah.
Like, this very, very well. Some struggles we've shared together as members of the same actual family, and some we I know
Yeah.
that we've been through sort of separately. One that I'll name, I know that impacted both of us, and I'm sure I know influenced your ministry, was the loss of Manda.
Yeah.
And for those listening, Manda was my cousin and Uncle Bruce's eldest child, and she died suddenly and unexpectedly. And that loss definitely impacted all of us in a great deal, and in a variety
Mhm.
of ways. But did you find having those practices of prayer and rituals already as part of your life, did those help you, and continue to help you? It's not like you're done grieving.
Well,
So,
no, I don't think you ever get finished
no.
grieving. I
Mm-mm.
remember when I was in seminary, they were teaching you if you can get through 1 year, you know, then everything would be all right. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's not true. Uh, I think because I just talked about it the other day in a sermon, that it was the support of the church and family and friends that got me through that time because I think the grief was so strong that the practices, it's like you're on the couch and somebody says, well, you'd be all right if you could get off the couch and go to work. And I would, you'd say, well, if I could get off the couch and go to work, I wouldn't be on the couch. Yeah, wouldn't be depressed.
Right, right,
So
right.
it was the support, I think, that got me initially through that time. Because as I was looking back on it, I think I was numb.
Yeah. That's what I've said to people is that first year of grief when I have discovered when you lose somebody who's that close to you. And I mean, child loss is another level. But it's that's how I spent like the first year after my mom was born. That's exactly born. It was
Born.
a year that Atticus was born, the year
Yeah.
that my mother died. Is numb is the way. I said I spent the first year numb and the second year angry. Right. And anger was kind of how I got to feeling all my emotions again. Thankfully that season passed, but that's how but that first year was definitely going through motions, less connected, if not for people kind of constantly pulling me in, as you're saying, to connect. I don't know what would have been. And I was ever thankful for the community of people that I had that helped, helped me to be present, because it would have been very easy to just disappear.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed is that after maybe a year and a half or 2 years, I could start to, even in my sermons, tell funny stories about Amanda or how she was, or things she used to do and say, you know. So that's different.
Has it changed any of the ways, like, are there stories now, biblical stories that you read, or people of the Bible that you have a different understanding, like that this has helped you have a different perspective or understanding of, that you didn't, not that you would have wanted it, you would have preferred to never have that perspective, but
There is a line, and I will probably mess it up, but it's from the slaughter of the innocents in Matthew, when Herod wants to wipe out all the children so he can
oh,
get, and it's Rachel is weeping for her children and won't be comforted.
and that's taken on a whole new
Yeah,
level of view. That's really powerful. You just gave me goosebumps, which is not the first time in our conversations that's happened. I mean, you've consistently been a person that I've gone to in my life, both for pastoral advice as to how do I do this, Uncle Bruce? Have you ever dealt with this, and how can you help me through it? But also, as an uncle, as a godparent. So one of the ministries that I would say that you and Aunt Marlene, and thus you taught to your children to do, is and your grandchildren, is what I call the ministry of presence. Just being present. There's not one sort of major marker in my life that throughout my whole life that you and your family have not been present at. And sometimes the presence is the card, right? You don't show up on all my birthdays, but there is always a card. So you do in some ways, but that is a very powerful ministry, which sometimes I don't know that we do a great job of naming that as a spiritual practice, that walking along somebody, being present for somebody through their joys, through their griefs, through even the mundane,
yeah.
is really powerful. So was that something that you innately always did? Is that something that Aunt Marlene taught you? Is that like?
I think she taught me.
Yeah, she's very good like that.
Yes.
She doesn't miss anything. She has all that stuff in the calendar. She's very good at it.
Oh, she's excellent at it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, she is. But it's a definitely, I would say, a spiritual practice. I have, I know ministry isn't one of these things that is 9 to 5. I mean, sometimes it's not, right?
Mhm.
It can be, it works on whatever time frame it wants to. And because of that, I think it becomes more important to have ways to uh decompress or to get away or to refuel. What would you say some of those things have been for you in your life? Because I mean, I could give you a list of things that I've witnessed that you do, but I'd rather hear it from you.
Well, in days past, it used to be weightlifting.
Hmm.
That would really help me get away. Um, Music does it now, especially my Jimmy Buffett music. Yeah, but I have like 3 or 4 different playlists that I listen to during different times of the day. One of them's a worship playlist for my morning devotions, and then I
Who's
have
on
one.
that? Or
Let's
what's
see.
on that?
Well, let's see. There's some Peter Mayer. Um, I'm trying to think who else that people might. Peter Mayer being the lead guitarist of Jimmy Buffett. There's a praise chant that I really like, and I can't. It's a victory chant, and I can't remember who the artist is now, but she's famous in gospel circles. Then I listen to things like Appalachian Spring or the Four Seasons or the Planets, um, things like that.
Yeah. And so music, weightlifting. I like the way you just said this. So I'm gonna, you didn't just like go casually to the gym and lift weights. You were like,
Oh,
a,
I competed
yeah, you like you were like a ranked player.
on a low level, in the
I
state of
guess
Missouri.
not from my teenage self. Like we were
I
a very
understand
high.
that. I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, but yeah, I enjoyed that. But my body just got old and won't do that anymore.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. Some of those changes you feel like they happened overnight, but they've been gradual, just like every, some like most things. It's been a more gradual process. So one of the other things that you've always been really good at modeling is you're an avid reader. You are a well-read human being. Um, but you don't just read, like you also go through what is it? I was going to say the Feast of the Word, but that's not, it's the Festival of Homiletics.
Yes. So I do a couple kinds of reading. Um, I listen to junky mystery novels, and then I have my morning reading that I do, which um, has right now I'm reading of all things Robert's Rules of Order for being a moderator, um, Amy Jill Levine's short stories of Jesus, a guy named Roger Rosenblatt who's really good. He's funny, but about aging, rules
Okay.
for aging. Um, One of my go-to spiritual guys is Ronald Rolheiser. I listen to him. I'm reading a book of his writings right now, and what else? A history of the Old Testament, short history of of Israel rather, and then Frederick Buechner. So that's about what I'm reading right now.
So I also am a a reader, like a polygamy reader. It's like the one place I do that same thing. There are some that just do one book at a time, but I generally do like what you're saying. So how is it that you do that? Because do you just do a chapter every day? Do you do as far as the Spirit leads you? Like, how do you do that?
I sit down and I think I give myself about an hour, maybe less than an hour, depending on what's going on. And I just read a section of each book each each day, or almost every day. Sundays are somewhat different, but yeah. So I read a section of each book. Try to do that with the Bible too. I'm reading about 6 different places, a chapter a day.
Okay.
except when I get to, I think, the 119th Psalm, which if I read that chapter, I'd be there a week or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's a big that's a long chapter, right? It's like the whole alphabet or something.
Yeah.
And have you always has that always been the way that you've done reading or I mean, read books your whole?
No, it used to be I would do one at a time, but I like this way better. I don't know where I developed the habit, um, but it really became entrenched in me here as something I do every day.
Yeah. I mean, that discipline, that consistency of practice is, I think, also a spiritual gift that is really important because it's so easy to let those things go by the wayside if you don't prioritize them.
And you mentioned Festival of Homiletics, which I think
Yeah.
is one of the great events of the year for us. Marlene and I went by myself the first year, and I was so impressed with it. I called and said, "I think you'll love this," and we've been going ever since. And we
Yes,
also got
Marlene, not a pastor. She's a teacher, but she is a theological nerdy as all the rest of us. I mean, she loves it every bit as much as her husband, her niece, and her brother, who are all ordained ministers.
and then we go to Chautauqua too,
Yes.
which we've done for 20 plus years, I think, and find that a great place. It's like what I call summer camp for mind, body, and soul.
Mm-hmm. And when you're there, that you really do all that. You play bridge, you listen to music, you walk around, you take classes, you
Play
kind
golf.
of play golf. Oh yes, I forgot you're a golfer as well. Yes, all those things. So you weren't a golfer your whole life though. This is something you've done.
I'm playing more now, or a little bit, but I've played poorly my whole life.
Okay. And you've gotten your grandson into it. I don't know if Ada Grace has done it with you too, but
Yeah,
Miles plays with you.
right over next to me where I'm sitting is Ada Grace's small set of clubs, which we got a kid set for her. We've got
Okay.
to trade that in for a bigger set because she's
She's
just
got that.
sprouted up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, she's at the age where they do that. And girls, of course, do it sooner than the boys do. But yeah, I mean, that's very exciting. It's nice that you can find activities like that to do with
It's
that are intergenerational. And that's not the only one. I mean, you do chess with them. There are a lot of games that you.
Yeah, we have a small chess club in Olean, and I go many Tuesday nights when I don't have meetings or something to play chess and play with all ages of people.
And do you find that you equally learn as much as you teach in those settings?
I'm always learning chess because my problem is I can't memorize anymore, and there's a lot of memory stuff in the openings of chess, and memory is just memorizing. I could do it back in seminary. That's how I passed Greek. I memorized everything.
Well, you didn't grow up in a Presbyterian background.
Jewish.
Yeah. So, and yeah, so talk about that transition a little bit.
Well, the thing is, I was more than nominally Jewish. I was Jewish, and which is a and my I was raised by my father essentially till I was 13. And I would go to Sunday school, and we would go to temple on the high holidays or synagogue on the high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and the like. But growing up in the South, people weren't sure what Jewish was because we had those dog tags. I know this is an old thing that only people my age will probably remember, but in case there was an atomic war or something, we all had dog tags on us with our names and our birthdays and our religion and stuff.
I have never heard that. Was that just that you grew up in Alabama, right?
Arkansas, and then I
Arkansas.
moved to Alabama.
Yeah.
No, I don't know, but we all had dog tags.
Just in case
and people were not sure what mine stood for.
Why?
Well, because they weren't sure what Jewish was.
No.
Some of them, well, the word we would use now, some of them thought it was African American.
Huh.
That's not the word they used then.
Yeah. Not in Arkansas, right?
No.
No, not anywhere, actually. I shouldn't just
That's-
limit it to the
yeah.
South.
When I tell people I live in New York, they think New York City, and I tell them to think Mississippi because we're small,
Yep.
um,
Rural.
very conservative,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
wonderful people.
So that was until you were 13, and then your father passed away,
Yeah,
and you were then raised in a completely different house.
right. Where the man was Jewish and the woman was Southern Baptist. But I went and I was confirmed in the temple, which is an interesting thing. I wasn't able to be bar mitzvahed in our conservative synagogue in Little Rock because my mother wasn't Jewish
Hmm.
and never converted. And they have this thing that the bloodline comes through the mother. And
Yeah, it's maternal.
yeah,
So then you're 13. You had quite a transition.
yeah, my world ended sort of when I was 13.
Yeah. You got thrown into adulthood. Though 13 is one of those markers, religiously also a marker of transitioning into adulthood. But I think back to my 13-year-old self and think,
Yeah,
and I have a 13-year-old who thinks they're an adult
yeah,
and knows as much, but we're like, no, you don't have all the content yet, kiddo, but we'll help you get there. We'll help you build that bridge to transition to adulthood. But so now you're in a completely different environment, Southern Baptist.
right.
Yeah.
But she was just nominally Southern Baptist too, and
Okay.
was nominally Jewish. I probably spent more time in the synagogue or the temple than they did, or because I went, and part of confirmation was that you had to attend, twice a month, and I attended every week at the services out after football season.
And then how did you go from there to PCUSA?
Well, it, through Aunt Marlene, as you would call her, through
As
my
I would
wife.
call
Yes,
your wife.
through my wife. She, I was interested in religion. I was taking religion courses. I liked them. She basically said you ought to think about this Jesus guy, and didn't push.
Okay.
And then we started. Um, she she was doing a Bible, an independent study rather, on the relevance of the Presbyterian Church to the community.
Mm.
And
They're still
in,
writing.
in Memphis at college. And one of the pastors asked her to come and lead their youth group. And so we did that and got involved with a small Presbyterian church that was PCUS at the time. And so, as I tell people, that's back when Jesus was Lord.
Mm.
I didn't get into the Savior stuff till later, but I was baptized at Gracewood Presbyterian Church, and I would. They were asking the questions, do you consider yourself a sinner, or whatever they, how they do those questions. Do you renounce sin? And I was really brave at the first one and answered very strongly. And then just something came over me, and I could barely speak, the other questions. And I was wrong. I thought that when you became a Christian, then you would go automatically to be a pastor.
Oh,
And once you were a pastor, you would know all the things that Jesus taught. You just tell people, and they would do them.
because you were how old then? You were young.
Get 20.
Yeah.
I was a little naive, a lot naive.
I like to think I'm still a little naive or a lot naive. Yes. Yeah, but that has not proven to be the case. You didn't become a pastor right away, nor did you suddenly everybody listen to you.
Neither. It took me 6 years to get through seminary.
I
But
didn't know that. Okay.
yeah, but and part of it I think was because I had no church background.
Mm,
Everybody else in seminary all knows all this stuff about church. I didn't
mm.
know any of it. They knew what hymns people liked and all that kind of stuff. And
You hadn't grown up that way.
right.
Right. I mean, you can't, well, I I sing whatever hymn. I don't care what it is all the time. Some people wish I would just pick a lane and stick to it, but I'm like, but look, at one point you learned Amazing Grace. You just have been singing it so long you don't remember learning it, but you did learn it. It's not like you were innately born with that tune in your heart. And I mean, I'll do new hymns, and sometimes they go horribly wrong.
Well, I since I don't do music well, I don't read music. I have a program on my computer that plays the hymns in the hymn book.
Yeah.
And but every once in a while I'll hear one. I say that would be good, but it doesn't translate to organ real well.
Uh-uh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I'm really comfortable with, I guess because I am awkward and I've always been awkward. I've always kind of felt out of place, that the idea of not doing, like, stumbling my way onto a stage, or tripping and falling on my way there, and whether that's through a hymn or like physically at the pulpit or whatever, I guess it's never bothered me, because there was a time it bothered me, I think, but I've sort of embraced the fact that I'm awkward. I mispronounce words. I stumble my way there. I don't, it's not even something I know really well. Sometimes I'll destroy, like the Lord's Prayer. I've said it my whole life, and I still sometimes will stumble, and not just the sins and sins against, or debtors and debtors, or trespasses. Like,
Oh, you try it without the words in front of you? I
oh,
would never
yeah,
try.
yeah, yeah. You don't
Oh,
even try.
oh,
Well, sometimes I have the words in front of me and I still mess up because I've read the wrong line. I skipped a whole line.
I my line in worship usually when I make a mistake is next week will be perfect. Last week I forgot the first hymn and
Just
was
completely.
it just and I started next week and then I just kind of broke up, put my head down and said, we'll never be perfect.
Yeah, it's true. But I've embraced I will never be perfect. I'm always just a work in progress, but sometimes that has also helped me to, when I have those moments that, like this, right? Um, some people I'm better at taking a breath at. Usually, well, non-family members, I'm always better at, like, taking a pause with than family members. Um, who are really family members that have perfected, this is a perfection they have. They know exactly which buttons to push.
Of course, they've had lifetime of
Life
training.
Time of training. Those muscles are strong. Um, but with other people, right? It's usually like, when there's like this resistance, or there's this encounter that goes awry. I'm much better at taking a breath and a pause and being like, they too are a work in progress. They too are a child of God. Let's let's proceed. And sometimes proceeding means turning around and not encountering them at all, right? And sometimes it means walking along together. But yes, my never once have we done a perfect worship service. That it's not a reality. Um Yeah, but there are things that there are many things that you do well. So you've talked about some of the books that you're currently reading and some of the music that you listen to, but you also are a television and movie watcher. So is there anything right now that you would recommend to people?
Oh, um, I guess I'm eagerly awaiting Ted Lasso's third season.
Yes, you're a big fan of his.
Right, I think that's the most fun show on TV. There's one that's coming up on Netflix. It's the second year of Perry Mason, but it's a retelling of the Perry Mason story.
Oh, so it's not the Perry Mason I
No,
grew up.
it's not the one where always, isn't it a fact that you murdered your wife? And the guy says, yes, I did it, and I'm glad I did. And now this is how Perry Mason became a lawyer and everything, and it's a lot grittier.
Okay, so it's like a prequel.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Uh,
and you do like the murder mystery stuff.
oh, I like, yeah, I do like my NCISs, all of them. I like Fire Country. I've just become enamored with that. I think it's, but right now I'm binge watching Criminal Minds. Marlene watched all the seasons, and I would never watch it because it was too brutal. But I'm getting to know the characters, and
And so what's Fire Country?
um, it's a story of, let's see how to fire in a place where there's always fires.
Okay.
Like in a forest area. Um, in California, I think it is, and I could be wrong on the setting. And it's a place also where there's a fire team, and then they send prisoners there to work as volunteers.
Well,
And
that's a real thing that does happen. Yeah.
yeah, and they work as volunteers, and it will help them with their sentence and everything else. And the interaction between it's all the characters and their relationships that I love.
So
Uh,
that's a theme. Characters and relationships that's what grabs you.
yes,
Yeah. And you have quite a few characters in your life as well. In your family that your chosen family, the family you chose to get in because you married your wonderful wife. You've certainly met a lot of characters along the way. But do you find this is quite a transition, but as you're talking about characters and relationships, um I mean, you've talked about some of those transitions that you've had in those moments that you've had. Do you feel like that weaving of the story of your stories, like growing up in the South to the North, being a minoritized person, being Jewish in the South, when a lot of people didn't understand even what that meant, to transitioning and living now. I mean, Missouri, you've lived in a lot of places, but Florida, you've been a minister in Missouri, now upstate New York. Do you find that having those relationships and characters has helped you to have a, a has widened your ability to be in relationships with all kinds of people versus
well,
this
I
narrative?
think maybe with a slight exception, blooming where I'm planted is the theme. And
Okay.
because um, I know people have this in just one sense. Let's just talk about prejudice and bigotry. From people have this imagery that it's in the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's everywhere.
Hmm.
And there are also good people everywhere. And so blooming where I'm planted. So I think I've thrived in the South, in Florida, in New York, in Missouri.
Right. Which are not all they're not all in the same zone growth, planting zones either, right?
No, they're not.
They're not. Things that grow in one place don't even grow in another.
But
Um,
right now, I think all those have prepared me for where I am now, which is, as I've told the people here, I think this is where my ministry was supposed to go all along, and everything has been preparation for this. And I'm where I want to be.
And why do you feel that that grounded sense there versus maybe other places?
I
What's
don't
the, is
know.
there,
It's the relationship and the love of the people.
okay,
They seem, even though it's a tiny church, they seem really committed to each other, and they feel really committed to each other. And it's just a place um, that I was supposed to be, I think.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think you do wonderful work there. Uh, I continue to enjoy the places. Well, you've helped me to discern a lot in ministry, some things, and given me advice about when to let things go. I think one piece of advice that you gave was about a church that you never served and you just interviewed for, and but they wanted you to keep sort of these strict office hours, and at the time you had a motorcycle.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that church.
uh,
Yeah.
so you were like, no, I don't want to have strict office hours, because sometimes what you need is to go ride your motorcycle. That needs to be your action, your prayer and action, right? So you couldn't be in a place that confined and restricted.
Well,
I don't know if it's you or the Holy Spirit, Uncle Bruce. I don't know which way you would word that.
I don't know, but I think I remember telling them, even kind of bluntly, that's what you may think you want, but what you really want is someone that when you need them, they will be there.
Correct.
And,
Which you are, which
yeah,
you have
and,
always been.
and
Yeah.
and you don't want someone who has a strict schedule that says, no, I can't come because this is this kind of time. You know, you want someone who, if you need them, they will say, okay, let me put all this down and I'll be there.
Yeah. And I think that was, um, that gave me a new framework that I hadn't entirely thought about either. You know, about what it means to have, what it means to be there when people need you, and what things that have to be put down, and what can't be put down, because there's sometimes that things can't be put down. um but that's some of the advice I think I have found really helpful. um but you also constantly want to, I I I don't know if following the trends might not be the right way to say that, but your practices have never been stagnant. Like, you're not a stagnant person in the stuff that you do. It is that continual blooming, right, where you're planted. That has been the way that I've seen you proceed uh in ministry, and even in your desire to go, what are some trends I should be paying attention to? Should I be, do I need to learn more about eco justice and climate change? Do I need to learn more about whatever the thing, womanism, feminism, all the stuff, the desire for knowledge has always been something that's been present with you. So was that always, or again, was that just later in life, that curiosity?
I think it was later in life. It took me a long time to realize I wasn't stupid, or dumb. I, school was not always the best place for me. You know,
That's interesting. So people, I mean, do you ever see people that you went to school with now who, if they knew you now, they'd be like, what, that kid?
I think I've seen a couple, but they've all changed.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but I'm sure they would think, how did he ever get there? And I didn't always have a positive, relationship with teachers. Um, that's why that's one of the things I'm always talking about is how vital teachers are, because they play as big a role, if not bigger, than parents do in shaping how a kid views themselves.
Well, yeah, because they do. Like my kids spend 6 to 8 hours every
Yep.
day with teachers, and in elementary school, it's the same person almost the whole day long.
And I think one of the things that's interesting about that in my grade school experience, and especially, and how, is I didn't have a mother who knew how to advocate for me.
Mm. And that makes a difference.
It does. You need an advocate, I think, if you're in school.
I would say you probably need an advocate, or you need to be taught how to be a good advocate, right? So sometimes people will say like, well, yeah, this thing, but they know better because they're a doctor or they're a teacher. And I was like, nobody knows you better than you.
Right.
Like, right? So if you feel like something's off, you have to tell that so it can be figured out. Or if you feel like, yeah, I'm just not getting it, like I need more help to understand this. But that's hard. I mean, as a kid, it's generally is a parent who would do that, advocating for you, to be like, look, my child isn't, or my child is, right? My child needs these things in order to have
Mhm.
equity with the other students.
Yeah, I I didn't become really where I was pleased with, I guess, my intellectual powers until after seminary, after my doctor of ministry even. It was
Really?
in yeah, it was in I mean, I what I discovered in looking back on it, I was smart enough to get through, but I didn't know that. I thought I was, faking people out.
I was like, I was gonna say, do you think it was all like this accident? Like you
Yeah,
just kept
I
tricking
do.
people?
How did I get through all this?
You should have been a magician. You didn't know you're tricking people so well. And so it wasn't until then. It wasn't until
Probably I've done the most blooming in the last 10 years.
Hmm. And do you think that is by finally accepting accepting this, what others have always known, what others have, I guess, known about you or have thought about you, or
I think it has a lot to do with the church I'm at,
okay.
this feeling a place of being comfortable.
And so that's part of what, right? That then you get to be your authentic self. I
Yeah.
think that's really powerful, those moments then when we can, like I was saying about being awkward, like I claim that as part of my authenticity. That's a part of who I am. And once I did, and not try to hide it or pretend or think I was tricking people into thinking I was cool and failing miserably, is is uh is exactly that, right? Once I sort of embraced it, then I felt like the roots went deeper. And so thus I could like stand or be a little more confident in the way that I proceeded in the world, and still not knowing everything. I mean, right? But accepting that you like, I don't know, accepting that you do have something to give in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you do have gifts and graces for that moment, or knowledge. And sometimes the knowledge is saying, yeah, I'll help you figure that out. or or just being there to witness, or walk along somebody during that time. So this transitions us nicely to my final question for you, Uncle Bruce, um which I know you know the Care Bears because your children are my age. Cy and Amanda were my age, so they would have grown up with these guys as well. Um, is when we talk about those strengths and those characters that have been with us throughout, and about those practices of love, I kind of think of the Care Bears as this symbol of modeling what that means for us, is taking the gift and the graces that we have, and literally shooting it out into the world in order to heal and be with and be present. So if you were a Care Bear, Uncle Bruce, what color Care Bear would you be? And what do you think the symbol on your belly is? What is the symbol that epitomizes the essence that is Reverend
Well,
Dr. Levine?
I would either be pink or purple. It just depends on the day. Probably pink.
Mm-hmm. That's the color I associate with you, always has been.
And my strength would be, well, it's also my greatest weakness too, is loyalty. Loyalty.
Mm. And how would you draw loyalty as an emblem? What would that look like?
I'm not an artist, so it would just be a big L.
It would just be a big L that just stood, everybody would understand, stands for loyalty.
Loyalty.
Giant capital L that stands for loyalty. Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned both a strength and a weakness, as I think sometimes they can be, right?
Yeah.
Our gifts can also be our biggest growing edges. What makes you say that, though, with such conviction?
Well, with loyalty, you'll stand by a person and trust them, which is a good thing to do. But sometimes you do that when it's detrimental to you. And sometimes, people aren't the perfect creatures you want to see them as.
No, right. That's true.
Yeah.
And neither are we, right?
No,
We're
I
not,
understand that.
yeah.
But to trust people and then they let you down, because you thought that your loyalty to them covered everything and that they would give it back in return. Wait a minute, just a second. I want to show you. Do you see? Look who's here.
Oh, it's your cat.
Gus,
Loyalty
the
right
dog.
there. Oh, is that the dog? Was that Gus?
Gus the dog. Yeah. Gus
Yeah.
came up to visit. He wanted to be petted.
Well, talking about loyalty, right?
Yeah.
You have that symbol. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't put a giant dog on your belly, because they're
That is an idea. I might do that. I think that's even a better idea. Right, Gus?
with wearing a little little collar with an L on it. Yeah, for loyalty. Because I mean, you've always been a dog person, and maybe that's part of why they embody that sense of loyalty. But you're also right, like dogs equally can be hurt by the people whom they trust to take care of them, right? And then if they thankfully can get out of those environments, right, there's a process of relearning that trust then with others, because the act of being loyal is something that's so innate that's not the part that's going to go away, right? It's it's this other side that has to happen. But that's beautiful. I'm glad Gus came and said hello. He's going through some hardships. Yeah.
Not anymore.
He's all done.
He's all done. The vet thought he had cancer. He had a spot on his mouth.
Yeah.
And then he was scheduled for surgery, but Marlene was curious too, because the spot kept getting smaller.
Which doesn't happen with cancer.
Which doesn't happen. And so the vet did another test on it and said, I don't see any cancer cells. And now Gus is all healed up and he didn't have to have surgery.
That is nice.
That is.
Yeah. Well, I know that you were praying, but you also had all of us praying. So, there's the power of prayer at work, right? Right. Visual power of prayer at work.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And he is your companion, so that you don't have to ever be alone, which is nice as well. He's a constant for you. Thank you, Uncle Bruce, for spending this time with us.
I didn't know it would be as easy as it was.
We try not to make it hard. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Peace, blessings, and I love you. Bye-bye.